In 2017, Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson surprised the heck out of me with the crazy funny buddy action movie, The Hitman's Bodyguard. Fast forward 4 years and we've got the sequel with The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. Does this capture the zany charm of its predecessor and amp up the action? Bodyguard Michael Bryce continues his odd friendship with assassin Darius Kincaid as they try to save Darius's wife, Sonia. So first off, if you've not seen the first movie, I do highly recommend you watch it before checking out the sequel. It's going to help establish who the characters are and give you a good basis for the hilarious animosity. Now, I'm not really going to compare this new entry with the first because I feel this needs to stand on its own as a movie. As it's hinted from the title and shown in the trailer, Selma Hayek takes on a much larger role in this as Sam Jackson's wife. Ryan Reynolds is a bodyguard who's still trying to regain his license that he lost due to some circumstances that were shown in the first movie. This has a psychological effect on Reynolds, which leads him to a point in his life where he's sort of reevaluating things. This also means that while he's doing this, he places himself on a no guns and no killing sabbatical. You can imagine how this can cause some difficulties for him in this action story. Now, I really liked how there were some unexpected scenes and scenarios throughout this. There are a couple of sequences that I just didn't see coming, and then that made them really funny, especially as they put Ryan Reynolds into humorous situations. He plays him off in a really believable way, and he's not afraid of physical comedy, which is needed for many of these to be pulled off effectively. Now, with any movie, we need an antagonist, and this time it's played with absolute ridiculousness from Antonio Banderas. He's over the top and cliche in just all the right ways. His character and performance fit perfectly in the story trajectory. Now, the chemistry is still great between Reynolds and Jackson. They are just that odd couple to the extreme. And the banter we get is good, but everything is so frenetic that I wanted more of the sarcastic mutterings from Reynolds. The snide remarks that he characteristically employs so well just didn't come enough for me. And even though when we did get them, they were fun. As we'd expect, there is a ton of action and fighting. I mean, this isn't lacking in the gunfights, car chases, and explosions arena. The violence is cranked up to 11 and it makes for an exciting watch. It also prevents the story from feeling slow. We bounce from situation to situation and almost all of them include some crazy scenes of action. Now, towards the latter half of the movie, there was one scene that I was really hoping for Hugh Jackman to make a cameo. It was the perfect setup and it just would have been absolutely hilarious. But then when the reveal happened, it was somehow even better than I'd expected, and it wasn't Hugh Jackman. I mentioned how the movie bounces from situation to situation, and while that's good for the action, the story feels like it's just a series of short ideas all patched together. There is an overall cohesiveness, but it really does feel like we're slammed here and then pushed there, just in the entire timeline. And because of this, we're taken in a bunch of different directions that really only serve to keep us from watching the antics of the trio. Now, for me, Selma Hayek took a lot of patience to like at the beginning of the movie. She's exactly how her character was in the first movie, but there we only got small doses. Here it's a full force assault on us. And as the movie went on, she did soften out a bit, which made her a bit more palatable to me. Sam Jackson is great in this, but it feels like he took a back seat more of the time. Now, that's not to say that he didn't have his moments, but I don't think the dialogue time is shared equally between the three. Now, the overall plot is generic and it feels like it came out of an 80s or early 90s action movie. It's also pretty uninteresting. And that's partly because it's not well defined, but also because I just wasn't made to care. The setup was a very brief mention, and then there's no investment on the impetus for the villain's motives. And I'm willing to accept that though, because it doesn't distract too much from all the action. Now, a day after watching, I was struggling to remember how the trio got in the situation that they're in. I did finally remember though. And so what I'm saying is that the impetus for their action isn't memorable, but there are still scenes and parts of the movie that are very memorable. Now, the offshoot of side characters like Frank Grillo feel like it yanks us out of one situation to put us in another, and then that scene was only there to do that because the writers just didn't know how to write a transition. There are some continuity issues in this too, but they're not so blatant that it makes much of a difference. It's more inconsequential things that you'd probably classify more as a goof than an actual story issue. Now, for the comedy, I thought the dialogue was funnier when it was only two of the three together. And whether that be Ryan Reynolds and Sam Jackson, or Reynolds and Hayek, or Jackson and Hayek. When the third would come in, it felt off balance, and sometimes the comedy felt a little strained. But when it was just the two of them, it flowed well and it could produce more laughs. So yeah, the story is very predictable, but I don't knock it for that. I mean, we're promised an action comedy with plenty of craziness, and that's exactly what we're sold. As a sequel, I do think it's the weakest of the series so far though. The antics are fun with a huge amount of violent action, and the dynamics of the characters work, but they work better when it's just a duo rather than a trio. And while some of the humor does feel forced, there's still a good amount that feels natural and comes across as genuinely funny. For me, I prefer the first movie, but I still had fun and was engaged throughout this, which was a relatively quick watch at only 99 minutes. There's sex, no nudity, an absolute ton of profanity and violence. I give The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard 3 out of 5 couches. So do you have a favorite movie that either Reynolds, Jackson, or Hayek stars in? Let me know what it is in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.